guys. All right. Wow. 3-0, which was predicted by exactly nobody. And anybody who says otherwise is, not exactly telling the truth. Good afternoon to you. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is the new Double Shot. Comes your way every weekday at 4 p.m. And there's no way to open this show other than to share that I think there's something beyond 3-0. And let me explain what I mean by that. In 2020, the COVID year, your favorite football team started out 11-0, and there wasn't a soul in this city who took it seriously, myself included. Why? They were getting the results. Ben was engineering all these fourth quarter comebacks, and it was nice and it was satisfying. And because of the circumstances, it was admirable, but it wasn't going anywhere. This one, my friends, is on a ramp. This one is still going like this. I'm not going to sit here and break down every positional room and all the other variables that are in this, but I can tell you, just as an example, I'm going to give you one. That's inside linebacker. Inside linebacker has two new faces and one, I don't want to call him old. Landon Roberts isn't old, but a previous face in our man E. But the other guys, Patrick Queen and Peyton Wilson, have been talking to me for 3 weeks now about how they're just learning where to be. They're learning how to react. And in Wilson's case, think about this, he's learning the NFL. He's learning schemes that he never would have had to face in college. And within that, they're becoming more comfortable in their usage as to how to spring themselves, kind of the way Queen did in going after his old buddy J.K. Dobbins with that big early hit. I asked Queen after the game yesterday, is that something that you could have done in week 1 or week 2? Oh, no chance. Because he's just trying to coordinate things. Remember the whole green dot thing and everything. He has to call the defense. These guys are just getting there, but you can say that about every position from quarterback on down. There's not one where you go, that's probably about as good as those guys can get. And that's exciting. That's the part that matters. Because this is a 17-game season, and I think we'd all agree that the hardest of those games come in the second half. Partly because they're AFC North, partly because of these really weird days bumping up against each other, and partly because of the caliber of the opponents. Now is the perfect time to learn, to improve, and hey, while you're at it, win. Put yourself in the best possible position to have those games at the end be not expendable, but look, if you lose them, they're not the end of the world. You still have yourself in good position to get into the playoffs. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the offensive line. If you look at these guys, that group, probably more than any other, is the one where you could see a significant improvement. Yeah, Zach Frazier's been consistent. James Daniels has been himself. Dan Moore's been better than most people give him credit for. But Troy Fautanu goes down. Broderick Jones steps into his place. Jones had a really, really rough week all around. Lost his job, had people questioning him. Oh, no, first-round bust and everything else. He finds out on Friday he has to get started, and he goes out there and grades well. And this is what he had to say today to reporters on the South Side.
Playing one side is also a big factor in, not being able to, just hone in on your skills and not switching from side to side every, so often. So, it is good just being on one side, we just going to continue.
Yeah, he's feeling good about it, and he should. He's get to stay on one side, focus on that side, be the best possible right tackle that he can be, and he was a pretty good one last season, and just everything gets a little bit better. Did you notice Mason McCormick going in for Spencer Anderson? Well, he was an improvement. Isaac Seumalo is going to be back soon. You could do this almost across the board. Oh, except for one position. And we're going to bring that up with Chris Halleck when we come back. At DK Pittsburgh Sports, we take pride in coverage that connects our city's fans to their favorite teams. Now, that connection's stronger than ever. Introducing our all-new state-of-the-art app. Find expert inside reporting and original podcasts. Check live box scores. Track the latest stats. Chat it up with our community of thousands of fans, all in one place. The new app from DK Pittsburgh Sports. Coverage that connects. Yeah, welcome back. So, not to be that guy, or in this case, since Chris Halleck's joining me now, those guys, I don't want to point out the one room or the one position where it looks like the answers might not be within, but I feel more comfortable discussing it after Calvin Austin had the game that he did, that you still might be benefiting from a WR2. Are you with me on this, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Calvin Austin did have a good game, ran some pretty crisp routes. Obviously the touchdown was really good, but you just imagine Brandon Ayuk running those routes. And then imagine Brandon Ayuk also being able to block. Now, obviously, Brandon made his decision, and so, it is what it is, and he's not in Pittsburgh. But think about anybody else who might be available maybe in a few weeks. I don't know, whether it's Devontae Adams or Cortland Sutton or anybody else.
Just those guys.
Just those guys. I mean, it's an upgrade over what Calvin Austin brings to the table. And again, not to take anything away from Calvin, probably maybe one of his better games, if not his best game as a Steeler. But again, you got to think about, okay, well, what's the ceiling for this offense if they add a better receiver?
Yeah. See, I looked at Calvin's game in a couple of ways. One, the touchdown was just beautiful. Everything about it, the design, the execution, specifically the throw, the read, Calvin's own read, playing off the backers there and everything, and finding that little seam and then exploding through it. That's exactly what you want from him. We've seen him do that actually on a Kenny Pickett throw, a similar play. He also had another catch going down in the other direction that was a similar, you just go right up the middle in a seam. But the other thing that sticks out in my mind about this is that he also had that, I don't know, you want to call it a fade, but the throw into the end zone that Fields made. The moment it leaves Fields' hand, even though it's on target, what do you think?
Actually, so I've gone back and watched the film on it a couple of different times.
Okay.
And that's probably actually one of Fields' I don't want to call it a miss, but misses of the game. And the reason why is, like, if you look at the point in which Calvin is making his break, he has separation from the defender. If Fields leads him more to the back of the end zone, not to the sideline, he's open and like open. And because and if he can,
what did you think when the ball was released? That's what I'm asking.
Yeah. I mean,
there's no chance. Because there's a little dude running the equivalent of a long distance fade. Yeah. And yes, of course, if every throw can be a little bit better.
Well, yeah.
You see what I'm saying here? It would be nice to have a non-George option there, in the same way that they had last week in Denver when they knew the Broncos were going to be all over Pat Freiermuth. So, all right, well, let's just work on this play with Darnell Washington. I don't know that you have that here.
I would agree. And even then, to the point that I was making, that throw that I'm talking about is a lot easier to make if the dude is 6'3" and not 5'8".
Yeah, it's easier to make to George, basically. Right. Again, if he puts the ball up and that's George over there, what are you thinking? It's that's not to cut up on Cal. He's been terrific. I think he's been good at wide receiver. He's been terrific on the punt returns.
Yes.
But there's a missing slot there, and we don't have to wonder if the Steelers share this viewpoint, because look at what Omar Khan was willing to give up to get Ayuk. That tells you how strongly they feel on the subject.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And then if they do add another receiver at some point, especially if it's like before the trade deadline. And right now, if certain teams continue to flounder and the Steelers continue to win football games, I don't understand why they wouldn't, and try to make that room as strong as possible. The room actually looks pretty good, because then you would have George Pickens, you would have that WR2 that we've been talking about all the time. And then you could have Calvin Austin be, essentially what he was yesterday whenever he was being utilized the best way possible.
Yeah, Cal can still get out on the field.
Absolutely.
I mean, he can still be involved. We can say this similar things about, when everybody's healthy, how do you use a Connor Hayward? How do you use a Cordero Patterson? There's lots of different ways to get people with different skill sets involved. The one guy that still stands out here, though, with an incomplete grade for obvious reasons, is Roman Wilson. Now, Roman was made inactive, and Mike Tomlin explained afterward yesterday, in large part because they wanted to have another defensive end out there. And, Roman was, I guess, he's still a little bit kind of iffy in coming back from his injury. But, man, got to get out there, kid. He's got to get out there and play a little bit.
Yeah, I'm curious.
Is he good enough, Chris? Can he be a WR2? I mean, this is a significant draft pick. It's not nobody.
This year, I especially with the injury slowing him down, I can't. I think even without the injury, I wouldn't have ever expected him to become WR2. And the main reason why is he has a very similar profile as Deontay Johnson coming out of college. The only thing that he does better than Deontay did coming out of college is block. Now, that's a very valuable thing in the Arthur Smith offense.
That's a low bar, my man.
Well, but I'm just talking about the fact
Deontay and blocking.
Well, that's what I'm saying. But obviously Deontay became a very, very good route runner. But there's also a certain type of game that Deontay played. It was mainly outside the numbers. That's kind of not what you're necessarily looking for in an Arthur Smith offense. You need somebody else other than George and other than Pat that can also help work the middle of the field and really work all areas of the field. And Roman Wilson, as a rookie, I mean, he hasn't even stepped on the NFL field yet. We just can't automatically assume that he's going to be able to go out there and work. Oh, he can work over the middle. He can work outside. He pretty much played just out of the slot exclusively at Michigan. Now you're asking him to go to the NFL and be like, oh yeah, work all areas of the field. No, it's going to be a slow transition. And I think that's what you have to expect right out of the gate.
It's funny, though, and I'm sure there's any number of people checking in with us today going, hey, they won yesterday. They're 3-0. It's about contention. It's supposed to be about, really, really going far in the playoffs, not just making it into the playoffs and losing by 40 the way it's gone in recent years here. And the positive out of this whole scenario that we're setting up is that it's just the one room. I'm not saying that the rest are all immaculate or whatever, but when you go around them, it's still the same specific position / role that we've been talking about all summer. That's good. That's what you want as a fan of this team. You want there to just be one area, and you want it to be something that can be addressed. Is there, Chris, any sense from within, and I'm asking only because I haven't gotten any myself, that this remains a priority for the Steelers?
I do think that Omar Khan, whenever he says we're always looking to add, we're always looking to make the roster better, I sincerely believe that he means that. And so obviously the trade deadline and any moves that can be made prior to then is an opportunity. Now, right now, it's 3 weeks into the season. And even then, week 3 is not done yet because Monday Night Football hasn't been played yet. And so there are teams that would have receivers that the Steelers could very well be interested in that just aren't ready to just go ahead and punt on the season and be like, okay, we'll try again next year. Let's get some value for some of these guys that aren't going to be here, very much like you see in baseball. But could that happen in a few weeks? And shoot, this is the time for the Steelers to get out in front. They already have. They're 3-0, and they have another winnable game this week. The Cowboys all of a sudden look very beatable. And shoot, man, if they could be 6-2 or even maybe 7-1 by the bye, which is the trade deadline, that why not add some more firepower? Don't waste an opportunity with the way this defense is playing. Don't waste an opportunity to get better and become a legitimate contender in the AFC.
Yeah, I'm looking at a team right now that shouldn't be fearing anybody the rest of the way. That's not to suggest that they're going to go undefeated or whatever, but I walked out of that locker room yesterday with one thought on my mind, and actually shared it with one of the team officials as I walked past. I said, you know what? This can be a pretty good team. And the official just nodded. It really can, though.
Yes.
This is a team that's got enough of a ceiling in terms of special players, enough of a ceiling now we've seen with Justin Fields at the most important position and the way George Pickens is growing up, that you've got splash on both sides of the football. What you need to do is to make sure that you fortify the basics. That's the easy part, man.
And see, that's the thing where you can get really, really excited, because look at what the offense did, especially in the second half. And the offensive line is still kind of finding itself. And by the way, they're really banged up.
And
I mean, Isaac said, okay, James Daniels might be having a career year so far. He has been mauling guys, especially in the run game. Zach Frazier has gotten off to a really, really, really good start. Imagine when Isaac Seumalo comes back and that interior of the offensive line gets they really start moving bodies.
Well, we saw it. We don't have to wonder about it, because Mason McCormick took Spencer Anderson's place. And the next thing you know, there's holes popping up on the left side for Najee Harris. And the next thing you know, after that, Najee goes and publicly states how awesome McCormick is, as if he's trying to send a message to everybody. This is what I can do if you give me some kind of room. There's more there. Dan Moore's been good. I didn't mean that as a pun. And then Broderick Jones reacquitted himself nicely yesterday as well.
It was a pretty solid performance from Broderick.
It's a pretty solid performance for the whole team, man.
It really.
That's what we're talking about.
It really is, and that's why. Again, it's September. They're still. I mean, Mike Tomlin. We'll talk about it. They're still kind of in that team development phase, and they're still building to that. And the good thing is that the lighter part of their schedule is right now. They can actually stack wins while they're still developing, still building a foundation. And then by the time that second half of the schedule comes around, their identity should be in place by then. And if that offensive line is blocking and moving guys, and all of a sudden they're actually running the ball the way they.
Different world, man. Different
Absolutely.
world. Yep. Chris Halleck, thanks for being on. When we come back, J1Q.
Safety is a habit. Gun safety and responsible storage are no different. Help prevent gun accidents, misuse, and theft. Keep firearms safe and secure when not in use. For safe storage options, visit projectchildsafe.org.
And for today's J1Q segment, we're going to Paul Gracer in upstate New York.
Hey, DK, coming to you live from upstate New York. I have a quick question for you about our wide receiver group. I know it's probably a question you get a lot, but this team, Omar Khan and company, seem to be very close to trading for somebody like Brandon Ayuk, who then signs his extension, and we don't hear any interest in adding to that group otherwise. And as we saw yesterday, without Roman Wilson being active, and it was just one eye poke, from having just three guys capable on the field. Great game by Cal Austin, which is awesome to see. Scotty Miller made some plays. George Pickens did his thing. But the fact remains, it's a position with not a lot of depth. So my question really is, why was there so much interest in bringing in Brandon Ayuk? But then when that didn't come to fruition, it just seems like the team just pivoted and has just decided that they don't need what we all feel they do, which is depth at the wide receiver position.
Paul, I'm going to get to your actual question in a second. I want to make sure that I have a couple other things cleared up first. I did mention in the previous segment that Roman Wilson was made inactive because the Steelers preferred to go with Dean Lowry, a defensive lineman, to get the last helmet. I fully expect you're going to see Wilson in a uniform Sunday in Indianapolis. He's going to need to have a good week of practice, but I do expect that you're going to see him. I also expect, actually, let me rephrase that. I hope we're going to see him get some kind of actual action You know, I think they need to find out at least what they might have in him before committing a gazillion dollars or all kinds of trade capital to bringing in a wide receiver from the outside. I'd still want that player, but at least you know to what level you're desperate to get such a player. Now, regarding whether or not the Steelers are trying to do this, you heard me and Chris say in the previous segment that we believe they are, but what I want to try to peel back the curtain here a little bit, because this is now in my neck of the woods, meaning media. The reason that you don't hear about the Steelers pursuing someone else is that these are not the types of stories that end up getting exposed. They don't end up getting out into the public. In free agency, agents are involved. Agents do this with everybody. They chirp like crazy. With trades, it's just Omar here, other GM here. There are times, and they'll tell you this, where they don't even let their lieutenants know because they don't want, at least not until the very end, for any word to get out. They don't want any kind of disruptions to their team or their processes. So they'll actually tell their assistant GMs and others around them, you'll know when you need to know. So you'll hear about a potential trade right before it happens. This is not uncommon, and I believe this is not at all a sign that Omar isn't trying. It's just that Omar doesn't have to share with anybody. I believe he tells Mike Tomlin, but I don't think for a second Tomlin's going to say, man, what reporter can I call? I really get along great with reporters. Who can I tell about this possible trade? He's not going to do that. So, and why would Ayuk be different? Ayuk was a sign and trade. Ayuk was public. Ayuk was chirping himself. That's not what this kind of trade would be. This is in season. Everybody's in uniform. Everybody's playing games. Agents, again, have nothing to do with this. So it's going to be naturally a lot more quiet. Really appreciate the question, because I've been hoping for an excuse to give that answer for a while, because I hear a lot about it. I appreciate everybody who checks in with Double Shot. We're going to do another one of these tomorrow at 4 p.m.